We're here with Congressman Tom Latham, a Republican who represents Iowa's 4th Congressional District. Thanks for joining us this morning. I think maybe what many voters want to know most is what you've done in your 8 terms in Congress to justify a 9th term. So could we start with that?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm not really looking for any endorsement. I'm here because I respect my constituents and be able to talk to them and tell them where I stand. I know we're going to disagree on a lot of issues, and just from reading your editorials, and so I don't know how much agreement we'll have on anything, but I'm here really out of respect for my constituents. Certainly, I think the number one thing for any representative in this state or throughout the country is to listen to their constituents. And I have been out, like the August, September break of the summer, doing my 28 town hall meetings, listening to constituents, trying to take what they say back to Washington rather than to have Washington, bring those ideas here. And I think that's one thing that I take a lot of pride in, being able to really bring their thoughts and ideas to Washington. Certainly, we've been able to accomplish a lot in the district. I can go to just about any place that I've represented and see a difference that we've made in the communities. Some of the larger things, the National Animal Disease Center up in Ames, things throughout you go up to Esterville, up to the curriculum they have at the Iowa Lakes Community College as far as the technicians for the windmills, being able to get that program, build a windmill for one thing, which I climbed to the top of and paid for it for several days with sore legs after that. But and I think that's what people appreciate, that we're responsive to the constituents, and I think they appreciate that.
And what are the things you hear, and how has that changed?
Well, I think it's changed dramatically from, we all remember the town hall meetings a year ago in August, and what has happened in this August and September, the town hall meetings. What I'm hearing from constituents is a lot of fear. They're scared to death of what they see coming out of Washington, the potential for no certainty as far as tax policy, a lot of new mandates, the health care bill, new regulations, new taxes on small businesses. They're fearful for their jobs. I mean, here in Iowa, we've got 114,000 people unemployed, and it's more on the way, because of the health care bill and a lot of other regulations. And the uncertainty out there is what is really scaring people, because they don't know what to expect or what shoe is going to drop next time.
So if jobs and uncertainty are the biggest issues facing the 4th District, what does Congress do to help the economy recover faster?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to give them certainty. And it is just the Congress left for the elections without having done anything as far as what tax policy is going to be, understanding that the tax relief that has been put in place is going to expire at the first of the year. Are their marginal tax rates going to go up? Are their capital gains tax rates going to go up? Are the estate tax, there's no certainty as far as being able to plan for the future. They see dividends going from 15 up to whatever your highest marginal rate is. A lot of things that have just been frozen in place today, and they cannot with any certainty go forward. There's nationwide there's about $2 trillion sitting out there waiting to be invested in this economy if in fact there was a signal sent from Washington as to what's going to happen in the future.
So would you have expected tax cuts?
Oh, absolutely.
Permanently or temporarily?
Well, at least for 2 years, as at a minimum, but that's part of the whole problem, is that basically anything that people invest in, anything that people want to hire more people, want to expand their businesses, right now they're going to be punished for it.
Can you talk about describe your personal role that you play in situations like this when you disagree with Congress leaving town without making some of these decisions and creating some certainty. Help us understand and viewers understand how you operate in Congress. What's your role at a moment like that when you want something to happen?
Well, certainly, and we're in the position right now of being about 79 votes short as far as the majority. So, the Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats control the agenda. But what I've told people in positions on both sides of the aisle is that we've got to have certainty out there, exactly what I was talking about when I was home and doing all the town hall meetings in August and ever since then. That's what people are concerned about, to tell them we've got to do this. We cannot leave town without taking action on these things. But it's been totally disregarded as far as, and it's, the bipartisan part of the situation, unfortunately for the constituents here in Iowa and throughout the country, is the bipartisan support is for extending the tax relief as it is today.
Don't you think?
It's only
Congress reconvenes?
But you're talking probably December. I mean, people have to, by January or November, you've got to know what your 1099s are going to have to look like, your W-2s for next year. You can't plan anything today.
You're right, the uncertainty is not a good thing. But beyond extending the Bush tax cuts, what else in the short term should Congress be doing to help the economic recovery move forward?
Oh, I think one thing we could do would be to actually pass a reauthorization of the highway bill, because that would at least give the states and give the contractors certainty as to what they could expect next year as far as funding levels. And the problem is the president came out, and Ray LaHood, who's a good personal friend of mine, the Secretary of Transportation, basically kicked the can down the street and said, well, we'll wait until next March. When in fact, next March means probably next September, October before anything actually gets done, if it does in fact get done then. But things like that, we could have a budget. I don't know if you were, but the House, for the first time since 1974, the Budget Act was passed, has failed to even pass a budget. It's unbelievable. So what they're telling the American people is we're going to not have any constraints on what is spent in Washington because we have no budget. We're not going to examine the priorities of the budget itself because we're not going to do our job. We're going to punt, go home. The reason that they wanted to just punt was because they didn't want to have their members vote on a budget that was $3.8 trillion of spending, $1.4 trillion of deficit. 41 cents out of every dollar spent by the federal government next year will be borrowed money. And we've already piled about $3 trillion in the last 20 months on top of the national debt. And that's why people at home are uncertain, because they don't know, the government is going to be competing for capital. What happens with inflation as we print more money, the Federal Reserve is having to buy the securities to finance the debt. What is the future?
So that's a good segue to another question we've tried to ask all the candidates, which is what should be done about the long-term structural national debt we've got? How do we address it?
We quit spending. Quit the massive increases in spending. In the last 2 years, we've had an 84% increase in discretionary spending in Washington. 84%. And it's pretty hard to justify that when you see Social Security recipients in the last 2 years now, for 2 years, will not get any kind of an increase. But the federal government's got to be put on a diet. We've got to get back pre-stimulus, pre-bailout levels of spending, at least as a strong indication that we're serious about the national debt and about spending in Washington, because it simply is not sustainable. The president's budget that he proposed by the year 2020 will have us at $20 trillion. And at that point, you're talking about $800 to $900 billion a year at current interest rates as far as just servicing the interest on the national debt. That's every dime that individuals pay in income taxes to the federal government.
So what would you cut?
First of all, you go back to what the funding levels were pre-stimulus, pre-bailout. You would save $100 billion. I think you've got to have an adult conversation on both sides of the aisle, come together to look at entitlement reforms, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all parts of it. Everything has got to be on the table, but you're not going to do that without an effort to be, on a bipartisan basis, support real reform that's going to lower the long-term deficits and to get back to a balanced budget and start paying off debt rather than keep piling it on.
Is revenue part of what's on the table?
I'm sure it is in some people's minds. The fact of the matter is, if the key to revenues for the federal government is a strong economy. That's where you generate revenue, and that's what happened, in the late 90s. We were just flooded basically with capital gains revenues because of the dot-com bubble. It burst later, and then it all went away. But we had restrained spending. The economy was strong, generated tremendous amounts of revenue, and that's how we actually got to a surplus at that point. Still, if you consider what was being spent for Social Security, it wasn't actually a true surplus, but on the books it was.
Spending in Medicare be controlled?
How can spending in Medicare? I think you've got to look at all kinds of. First of all, you've got to make Medicare viable for the future. And that's one huge problem with the health care reform bill, because you're taking $529 billion out of Medicare. People have paid into that because they expect to have that health insurance, that health care for them in the future. You're taking $529 billion out of that to fund a separate new entitlement outside of Medicare. And it doesn't do anything to shore up Medicare for the long run. It hurts it more than anything else. And so, what you've got to have to work on a bipartisan basis to look at where the waste, fraud, and abuse is in the system. I think you could save an awful lot of money if, in fact, Congress would do its job as far as oversight and holding the agencies accountable in Medicare. But I think basic reforms as far as providing change the focus of Medicare is to treat the sick, and it should be to basically keep people well. And you can save an awful lot of money that way.
Back on the revenue side, you said some people would say that we have to increase revenues. Do you include yourself among them or not?
Well, we have increased revenues, yes. But the way you do that is to get the economy going. It's not to raise taxes. No. I mean, it's been shown and proven. I mean, just look at history. And when you have a strong economy with lower taxes, where folks can actually generate sales and hire new people, the revenues come into the coffers.
That period you talked about during the dot-com period, there's a period before the Bush tax cuts when the taxes were higher.
Right, but there was also...
So we've eliminated that increase and the boom went away. Now what do we do going forward?
Well, we can't raise, when you've got 114,000 people here in Iowa unemployed, this is not the time to raise taxes on anybody.
2 or 3 years from now,
You can have that discussion, certainly. But I'm talking about what this next Congress is going to do. And I'm telling you, we cannot raise taxes in the face of a recession.
You can see that there's bipartisan support for not increasing taxes in the short term. But people,
I can see, I welcome it, yes.
I know you said that.
Right.
And so we're talking, I'm going to use the word structural. There's a structural deficit that,
you got to quit spending.
Well, okay.
This is not hard.
but
it is hard.